You are barefoot in the dust again, and the fields are warm with that strange late summer hush, when the cicadas drone like tired oracles and the olives have stopped pretending they're not bitter. The sun is soft only because you've risen early, long before it becomes the cruel god you know it to be. You carry a crooked wooden rake older than your father's ghost, and the smell of crushed time clings to your ankles, where the goats have brushed past in the dim gray before morning. It is the 207th year of the second age of men, or perhaps it's Thursday. Time is unruly in these parts, folded over like a poorly wrapped offering to gods who never asked for gifts. You are a farmer, a mortal one, which is to say a little pathetic, a little clever, and always trying to stay unnoticed by the things that live on mountaintops. You tend your land quietly, which is not easy because your land is jealous. Forgets that you feed it, forgets that you kneel. Sometimes it forgets that it's not a god. This morning the sky is pale and flickering, like the inside of a sheep's eyelid, and there's something off about the wind. You feel it in your shoulders first, not in the muscles, but in that deep grain of knowing where storms and mischief live. Apollo has been coming down the mountain again. You can always tell when he's bored, because the bees hum too perfectly and the lizards start gossiping louder than the priests. The bards say he is radiant, which is probably true if you enjoy being set on fire by handsomeness. But you know better. You once saw him throw a tantrum so radiant it turned a whole vineyard into raisins. He doesn't come down to admire mortals. He comes when he's angry or curious or both, which is worse. This is why you don't look up when he lands behind you. You hear it, of course, the soft crunch of immortality stepping onto dry grass, the sigh of the earth when it recognizes an old flame. But you just keep raking, which is the only defense you have left. The last man who looked directly at Apollo now spends his afterlife as a very poetic rock. "You," says the voice, low and golden, like honey melting off a dagger. "I need a favor." That's how it begins. Not with lightning, not with divine wrath, just a voice behind you that sounds like every sunset you've ever regretted. And because you are clever, mortal clever, which is the best kind, you do not turn around. You say, "The last time a god needed a favor, my cousin ended up as a goat. She still writes to us, with her hooves." There is silence, then a chuckle, then the scent of laurel and burnt sugar, which means Apollo is smiling and possibly plotting. "I need to borrow your ox," he says. "And you, poor farmer, you do not laugh, though you want to, because your ox is older than sin and twice as stubborn, because it is the only creature on your farm that listens to you, even when you're wrong. Because gods don't borrow, they take." But something in the way he says it makes you pause. Maybe it's the weariness. Maybe it's the way his words land with the weight of someone trying very hard not to be divine. You finally turn, slowly, and see him standing in your field like a badly disguised star, in mortal robes too clean, holding a golden lyre he's definitely pretending not to show off. His hair glows. Of course it does. His sandals hover half an inch above the ground, because gravity, like mortals, bores him. And behind those amber eyes, there is that restless hunger only gods have, not for food, but for novelty, for stories, for trickery, for mortals who forget to be afraid. "It's a simple request," he says. "I'll trade you a favor, one divine favor, in writing, sealed with sunlight." He even produces a scroll from nowhere, glimmering faintly, already signed. You stare at it. You stare at him, and then you do something neither of you expects. You say, "Fine, but you have to feed her first." The ox, of course. The beast with one eye, 3 moods, and an appetite for figs. Apollo blinks. "You want me to feed the ox?" You nod, dead serious. "Otherwise she won't move. She's unionized." And there it is. The briefest flicker of confusion on a god's face, like a sunbeam caught in mud. You've won the first move. And maybe, just maybe, you realize something no mortal is meant to say aloud. That gods, for all their fire and thunder and beauty, are very bad at chores. So he agrees, because he is Apollo, and pride is a song he's always playing. Because he thinks you're simple. Because he doesn't yet know what kind of farmer you are. And that's how it begins. The tale of the time a sun god was tricked, not by magic, not by war, but by a mortal with a goat-chewed rake, an ancient ox, and the kind of patience only those who work with manure truly possess. He tries, of course. He really does. The god of light, prophecy, and art. Now ankle-deep in hay, holding a fig in each immaculate hand, whispering sweet nonsense to an ox who has never respected daylight. You watch from the shade of a leaning olive tree, arms crossed, pretending not to enjoy this. The ox, her name is Marmara, after your mother's mother. May both their tempers rest in peace. Glares at Apollo the way a priest might glare at a wine stain on holy robes. She snorts once, ancient and unimpressed, then flops down with a thud that sends a cloud of dust over the god's sandals. He blinks. You think he's never been dismissed so completely. She doesn't like figs, you say, biting into one yourself. She eats wild pears. From behind the thicket, left side. He stares at you like you've just told him the sun sets upward. But then, grudgingly, he vanishes. Not in a puff of smoke or a chariot blaze, just gone. The pears return half a minute later, floating slightly and far too clean. Marmara ignores them. Of course she does. You shake your head and get up. You didn't ask if they were peeled. He stares at you again. This time, there's calculation behind the irritation. He realizes, perhaps too late, that you are not just some background character in a myth he's forgotten to write. No, you are a farmer, and farmers are gods in their own right, at least within their fences. So you take the pears, cut them with your thumbnail, smear a little of the juice into the dirt. A trick passed down from your great uncle who swore everything tastes better if it's a little dirty, and offer it again. Marmara eats. Apollo watches, golden arms folded, a crease forming between brows that have never had to furrow before. It's not about food, you say quietly. It's about the offering. The god says nothing. That's fine. You've already forgotten he's divine. You hitch the yoke, adjust the straps, and grunt as the old ox stands. The creak of wood and the smell of old sweat, leather, and muddy intelligence fill the morning. And just like that, you begin your march. The path winds toward the lower fields, where the barley is stunted and the stones seem to breed overnight. Apollo trails behind, floating slightly. He asks, "What are we plowing?" You say, "Debt." He doesn't laugh. You're not sure he understands. Most gods don't. They think in wars and destinies, not in rope fray and weather rot. He tries to help. He truly does. He touches the earth once and the soil blooms purple. You glare at him. They'll think it's poisoned. He raises his hands. It's just wild lavender. It's just God meddling. You mutter, and he does not reply. By midday, his robes are dirty. Not stained, that would be too mortal, but smudged in a way that bothers him more than pain ever could. Marmara is steady. You whisper to her under your breath, the way your uncle did, as if you're not just steering her, but persuading the world to keep turning. Apollo watches, puzzled. The god of music does not understand rhythm without applause. You let him rake once. He gets a blister. It heals instantly, but not before you see the panic in his eyes. It's the first time he's felt fragile since the war with the giants. You almost feel bad. Almost. At dusk, he collapses beside your well. The sky bleeds oranges and dust. You hand him a chipped clay cup. Water, you say. He sniffs it. It smells like frogs. That's because frogs live in it, you say. They don't mind. He drinks anyway. His eyes narrow. That's terrible. That's local. You smile. He doesn't. The night comes slowly in these hills, heavy with quiet and insects that do not fear divinity. You light your little oil lamp and show him where the fireflies nest. You teach him how to blow gently to make them rise like stars. He watches them, eyes flickering with something older than himself. This isn't what I expected, he murmurs. No, you say. It never is. He doesn't ask to leave. Not yet. He's curious now. And curiosity, as every farmer knows, is how you trap something dangerous without setting a single snare. Marmara snorts. The gods never learn. The second day begins with silence, the kind too full to be empty. You wake before the sun, but not before the birds, who have already begun their quiet arguments about territory and seed. Your joints ache in the loyal way they always do, announcing the weather before the sky has made up its mind. You step outside and feel the thin bite of dawn on your skin, cool and promising. Apollo is sitting by the fig tree, barefoot, staring at the horizon like he's waiting for it to apologize. His golden hair is dimmer in this light, more flax than flame, and his posture is wrong, too stiff for a man, too slouched for a god. You wonder briefly if Olympus teaches them how to sit. He doesn't acknowledge you, just lifts a hand in greeting without turning his head. She's still asleep, he says. You know he means Marmara, though you're impressed he can tell. Most gods wouldn't notice an ox had moods. She's earned it, you reply, stretching your back until it cracks like a dry branch. He finally turns to look at you, his eyes the color of old coins in deep water. Why do you do it? He asks. This life, this dirt. You don't answer right away. Instead, you crouch, scoop up a fist of soil, and let it trickle through your fingers. Because it forgives me, you say. Eventually. He frowns, which is still too pretty to be taken seriously. You give him chores. Not as punishment, though there's always a whisper of that, but because you know the gods have no idea how the world really works. You give him the cracked bucket, the stubborn gate latch, the hen that lays in riddles. You make him carry the egg that's always warm but never hatches. It's cursed, you say. He clutches it nervously. You watch him tie his robe higher, curse under his breath in flawless meter, and try to coax the mule into moving with the voice that once drove armies mad with beauty. It doesn't work. Of course it doesn't. The mule doesn't believe in poetry. You find that very comforting. By midday, you let him nap under the lean-to. He sprawls out like a bored painting, arms flung dramatically, one foot twitching. You drape an old net over him to keep the flies off. You don't tell him. You just do it. Because kindness isn't a favor. It's something older than Olympus. When he wakes, he doesn't thank you. He just blinks up at the beams and says, "Your roof whistles in the wind." "I know," you reply. "It sings when it rains." He seems to understand something in that moment, something just past the edge of language. You give him the cracked lyre from your shelf, not to mock, but to share. And he looks at it like you've handed him a childhood memory he didn't know he missed. He plays, softly, a song with no name, and for the first time since he arrived, the gods above do not look down. The wind quiets. Even Marmara lifts her head. You sit beside him and close your eyes, not to sleep but to listen, because the song is about growing old on purpose, about tending things that do not bloom for centuries, about being small and loud and endlessly stubborn in a world built for forgetting. When he finishes, he doesn't speak. Neither do you. There are moments when words only cheapen the weight of what's been felt. Later, he asks if he can stay another day. You shrug. That's up to her. You say, nodding at Marmara. She snorts and promptly falls asleep, which from her is a yes. That night, you eat olives in silence under a moon so full it might burst. He sits cross-legged, fingers tapping his knees, no longer hovering, no longer golden. "I think I was tricked," he says quietly. You nod. "Probably, but not the way I thought. Probably not." He leans back, stares at the stars like they're old debts he never paid. And in the hush that follows, you realize something dangerous. He's starting to enjoy this. And gods who enjoy being human are the most dangerous of all. The third day smells of smoke and crushed mint. A shepherd passed through the lower path before sunrise, humming something that sounded like a warning disguised as a lullaby. You heard his sandals scuff the gravel, his flock coughing through the morning haze, and then he was gone. Paulo didn't notice. He was too busy trying to carry a pail of well water without spilling it, which is impossible unless you're a trained priestess or someone with actual wrists. His hands are for lutes and lightning. They do not speak the language of buckets. You try not to laugh. The gods hate being laughed at, especially when they suspect they deserve it. He stares at the dripping pail like it has betrayed him, and in a way it has. Water was never meant to obey a god. It flows for gravity, not glory. "This is harder than it looks," he says. "That's the entire point," you reply, tying up your tunic and checking the grapevines for rot. You think he's starting to learn what every mortal knows instinctively, that the world is built on small humiliations, on socks that won't dry, on beans that never boil when watched, on weeds that grow back angrier. You hand him a bundle of thyme and ask him to tie it for drying. He holds it like it might explode. You don't help. You just wait. And eventually, awkwardly, he fumbles through the knot. It's a terrible knot. The thyme falls apart the moment he hangs it, and a cloud of brittle leaves rains down on his hair. He sneezes. You hand him another bundle. He stares at it like you've just challenged him to a duel. Again, he says. Always, you say. That's farming. Later, you find him whispering to the chickens. You're not sure what he's saying. It sounds like a hymn about wheat, but the hens have gathered around him like he's a very shiny, slightly confused rooster. One of them lays an egg in his lap. He looks both horrified and honored. That's Phyllis, you tell him. She lays where she likes. He nods solemnly, as if he's been inducted into a secret cult. Perhaps he has. The cult of inconvenience, of soft failures, of cracked eggs and backaches. You show him how to clean the olive press, which is ancient and moody and smells like sour wine. He doesn't complain, though he glances up at the sun once, as if asking it to intervene. It does not. The sun is his, but today it doesn't listen. That afternoon he tries to charm Marmara again. He brings her a garland of myrtle and a song that once made the moon weep. She sneezes on him and walks away. You nearly choke on your figure. She has good taste, you say. He wipes his tunic and mutters something in divine Greek that probably translates to stubborn bovine. You agree, but you don't say it. That evening, he helps you repair the broken fence. His hands blister again, not because they're weak, but because they are new to resistance. His power lies in bending reality, not nails. You show him how to hold the hammer at the base. He watches, mimics, and misses. The nail bends. He swears softly. You say nothing. Just straighten it and hold it again. The second swing lands true. By the fifth, he's breathing in rhythm. You almost don't recognize him. He smells like dust now, like pine sap and honest sweat. He hums as he works, a low tune that probably predates language. It blends with the creak of wood and the hum of evening insects. When the fence stands again, crooked but loyal, he touches it gently. Why do you fix what will only break again? He asks. Because it's mine, you say. And for once, he doesn't argue. That night, the stars come out in sulky clusters. You both sit on overturned barrels, eating cold lentils and stale bread, and it tastes like peace. Do you miss Olympus? You ask. He shrugs. Sometimes, but they never let you rest there. Always watching, always performing. He doesn't say who they are. You don't ask. You know what it's like to be watched, to be expected, to perform survival without applause. He glances up at the hills. What if I didn't go back? You shake your head. You will. They always do. Mortality is a fever. It breaks. He looks sad for a moment, but it passes. Gods aren't allowed to mourn what they can't keep. You toss the last of the lentils to the chickens. Phyllis pecks them aggressively. The wind sighs through the fig tree, and the fireflies return, slow and blinking, as if to say, "Here we are again," blinking through the dark, hoping someone notices before morning. By the fourth morning, Apollo wakes before you. You find him sitting cross-legged in the vegetable patch, whispering to the carrots. His robe is damp with dew, and his hair, once the pride of Olympus, kissed by Helios himself, is tied back with a fraying bit of twine you're certain came off a sack of barley. He doesn't hear you approach. Or maybe he does, but he no longer bothers with the theater of greetings. He looks up, eyes a little tired, a little more human, and says, "The carrots are rude." You nod because they are. Always. You crouch beside him, start thinning the sprouts, and don't comment when he mimics you with slightly more reverence than necessary. He's learned not to speak during the early tending. The plants don't like being talked over. The air smells like tilled earth and burnt rosemary from a distant hearth. Somewhere beyond the hills, someone is singing. It's a woman's voice, cracking with age, and the words are old enough to have forgotten what they meant. Paulo pauses. "She's praying," he says. You nod. "To whom?" he asks. You shrug. "Whichever God isn't listening too closely." He falls quiet after that. The rest of the morning is swallowed in chores. Weaving the grapevines back onto their wooden trellises, shaking ants from the fig baskets, turning the compost heap that steams like a disgraced altar. You let him stir it, and he gags theatrically when he uncovers the fermented melon peel. "You fed this to someone?" he asks. "No," you say. "They fed it to themselves. Then they regretted it, and now it returns to the earth." He shakes his head, muttering about the lack of ceremony. "Everything's a ceremony if you survive it," you tell him. After midday, you both sit beneath the olive tree, where the shade is loyal and the bees hum in drunken spirals. He plays the lyre again. Not for anyone, not even himself, just to pass the time. The tune is crooked, unfinished, full of pauses where thoughts slip in. You don't praise him. You don't need to. He's beginning to understand the point isn't to impress the olives. Later, you give him the afternoon firewood to split. He stares at the axe like it's offended him personally. "It's older than I am," he says. "Good," you say. "It's seen worse hands." The first swing is clumsy, too much grace, not enough gravity. You correct him. He tries again. Wood cracks. Something in him does too, you think, not painfully but like a shell softening. When you cook that evening, lentils again with a hint of wild fennel, he insists on helping. He cuts everything too perfectly, slices so clean they barely bruise the skin. "The knife likes you," you say. "Of course it does," he says, preening. "It recognizes divinity." You arch a brow. "No, it recognizes overcompensation." He blinks, then grins, and it's almost shy. You eat on the stoop, sharing one clay bowl. Not because you have to, but because the silence has become companionable. Afterward, you walk the edge of the vineyard as the sky dies beautifully, every vine silhouetted against a horizon bleeding peach and ash. He walks barefoot, dragging his fingers along the leaves. "This is worship," he says quietly. "No temples, no incense, just staying." You say nothing. You've known this your whole life, but he's only now feeling it, like a fever that teaches more than it burns. He stops suddenly and looks at you with something sharp beneath the softness. "You planned this," he says, not accusing, just curious. You don't deny it. You just smile and offer him a figure. He takes it, bites, chews thoughtfully. "I think I'm becoming mortal," he says. You nod. "It happens. Is there a cure?" he asks. "Yes," you say. "Leaving." He chews slower, doesn't answer. That night you dream of fields that plant themselves, of oxen who write poetry, of gods who stay. You wake to the sound of Marmara humming in her sleep, and somewhere beyond the fig tree, A god who has forgotten how to shine is trying to light the fire with a flint and failing beautifully. By the fifth morning, you no longer wake first. You rise to the scent of burned barley and the clatter of clay shards on stone. A familiar sound in your world, though never this early. Apollo is in the hearth corner, crouched low, staring at a mess of ash and ambition. "I was trying to make porridge," he says without looking at you. His fingers are smudged gray. His tunic is scorched at the hem. You nod solemnly. "Well," you say, "you succeeded in making something." He gestures to the remains of your best pot, now split in 3 even pieces, steam rising from its ruin like a small, embarrassed ghost. "This was supposed to be easy," he says. "It never is," you reply. He offers you the ladle, which is still whole. "For your troubles." You take it like it's sacred. "Thank you." You patch the morning together with dry bread and a single bruised plum. He eats both like they were nectar, chewing slowly, reverently, as if trying to decode the taste of humility. Later, you send him to muck the stall, which is as unpleasant as it sounds. You hear him retch once, then twice, then go silent, determined. When he returns, his face is pale, and something has shifted behind his eyes. A glimmer of awe for those who do things know him ever celebrates. "It smelled like old gods," he whispers. You hand him a rind of cheese and nod. Some of them linger. In the afternoon, clouds gather like judgment but refuse to speak. The wind curls around the fig tree and forgets where it's going. You show Apollo how to mend the netting over the vines. He listens carefully now, nodding each fray like a prayer he's inventing as he goes. You watch him work, silent, because anything louder would break the spell. At some point, you realize he's humming again. Not one of his polished celestial songs, but a crooked little village tune, the kind children sing when they think no one's listening. He catches himself mid-hum and looks up, sheepish. "Sorry, don't be," you say. It suits you. That evening, the storm finally arrives. Not dramatic, not divine. Just rain, soft and steady, drumming the roof like a quiet scolding. The two of you sit inside, sharing warmth from a fire that smells like wet wood and onion peel. The room flickers, shadows dancing over the rough walls, over Apollo's face, over the lyre in the corner he hasn't touched in 2 days. "Do you miss it?" you ask. "Being worshipped?" He doesn't answer right away. "I think I miss being certain," he says, "that what I said mattered, that the sky would obey. Doesn't it still?" you ask. He looks toward the window, where the rain falls like forgotten stories. "Not here," he says, and you think it's the most honest thing he's said since arriving. You pour him a cup of something fermented and terrible. He drinks it with reverence. "This tastes like regret," he says. "Then you're drinking it right," you reply. That night he offers to sleep on the floor. You give him the cot instead. He doesn't argue. You listen to his breathing even out, soft and human, and you wonder if Olympus is looking for him. If the sun will rise tomorrow without its favorite son. If any of the other gods even noticed he slipped away. But none of this matters. Not here. Not tonight. Here, There is only the smell of rain-soaked dust, the lull of creaking beams, and the gentle, unbelievable sound of a god snoring beneath your roof. The sixth day does not begin so much as drift into being, gray and slow and damp around the edges, as if the sky itself is still undecided. Rain still clings to everything, not falling but simply existing, in the folds of leaves, in the quiet hollows of roof tiles, in the sag of your boots when you finally drag them on. You find Apollo at the woodpile, shirtless and shivering slightly, trying to split kindling with hands more used to holding light than lumber. The axe bites wrong, skidding sideways. He curses under his breath, but the sound is different now. Not godlike, not performative. It's the mutter of someone who has tried too hard, too early, with too little. You say nothing. Just take the axe, flip it in your grip, and show him again. Chop, crack, stack, over and over until the pile grows honest. He watches, then mirrors. He gets better. The rhythm is in his bones now. The chickens avoid the muddy yard, sulking beneath the cart. Marmara won't come out of the shelter, her breath steaming the air like an irritated stove. You throw her a carrot. She glares at it. Apollo offers her a compliment, something about her sacred stature, her ancient bearing. She snorts and turns her back. She's grieving, you say. She hates rain. So do I, he replies, shaking his hair like a wet dog. You made it, you remind him. I inspired it. Mortals made it holy. You smile. That's close enough. Inside, the fire has gone sullen. You stoke it while Apollo peels onions with the pained expression of a martyr. You warned him. He didn't believe they could sting a god. Now his eyes water, and he wipes them with the back of his wrist like a boy caught in the middle of something too big for pride. They're mourning something, he says softly. All plants do when they're cut, you reply. We just call it flavor. When the stew finally simmers, rich and brown and clinging to the spoon like a secret, you eat in silence. He chews thoughtfully, no longer surprised when food tastes like the weather. Afterward, he insists on washing the bowls. You let him, though he doesn't see the basin has a crack that always leaks toward the left. You watch him discover it. You watch how he adjusts, shifts the bowl slightly, and wedges a rag under the edge like he's done it 100 times. You say nothing, but in your chest, something settles. That afternoon, you take him to the boundary wall, the one that crumbled last spring when the roots of the wild fig burst through like stubborn philosophy. Still leans, mossy and ashamed. Together you clear the loose stones, hands raw and gritty, breath coming in little clouds. Why fix this? He asks. No one crosses it. That's the trick, you say. Fix what no one sees. That's how you keep the rest standing. He nods and says nothing for a long while. When the sun finally slips behind the ridge, and the wind returns like a thought you meant to forget, he touches the old stone and murmurs a word in a language older than prayer. The wall glows briefly, but then he stops, lets it fade. He looks at you and shrugs. Didn't feel right, he says. And it doesn't. Not anymore. That night, you sit beneath the eaves and listen to the frogs trying to remember how to sing. The air smells of wet thyme and burnt wood. When will you leave? You ask, not accusing, just curious. Soon, he says. Probably. When they come looking? No, he says. When I start to forget too much. Like what? He pauses. What it's like to be worshipped. You nod. It's as you expected. Mortality is a delicious decay. Too long in it, and even gods rot beautifully. He stays outside after you go in, sitting beside the cracked wall with his hands in the wet soil, planting something he doesn't name. You don't ask. The seeds are none of your business. But in the morning, you notice something peculiar. A small green sprout, shaped like a harp string, curling up through the mud. And next to it, a muddy footprint the same size as yours. The seventh day comes warm and windless, a rare kind of hush that settles across the farm like a lid over a boiling pot, pressing everything downward and in. You wake to the sound of a broom, soft straw on packed earth, and for a moment, you think it's a dream of your mother. But when you rise and step out into the yard, it is Apollo, hair damp from the basin, sleeves rolled high, sweeping with the blank, purposeful expression of someone chasing thought away with repetition. He does not greet you. He simply sweeps. It is the quietest he's been since arriving. You do not interrupt. In the stillness, even the chickens are reverent. Marmara stares at him from the shade of the shed, chewing something that might have once been a sandal. When he finally stops, he leans on the broom like a staff and looks around the yard, as if he's only now seeing it clearly. The worn fence line, the vines coiled like lazy serpents, the corner where the roof dips, always dripping first. There's peace here, he says, not like a compliment, like a confession. You nod and hand him a pear that survived the storm. He bites into it, wipes the juice from his chin with the back of his hand like a laborer, and for once the gesture is natural. I used to believe peace was silence, he says. Now I think it's repetition. They're close, you reply. One just takes longer. That afternoon you show him the beehive. It's tucked behind the fig tree, a crooked box held together with old string and stubbornness. They won't sting you, you warn, unless you ask them to. He doesn't believe you, which is fair. He's been stung before by men and gods and things with sharper teeth. But the bees allow him. They rise and settle like breathing, humming against his fingers, tasting his skin as if unsure whether he belongs to this world or another. You watch him freeze, not with fear, but with awe, the kind that doesn't make noise. He touches the hive gently, presses his ear against the wood, and listens. They're singing, he whispers. Always, you say, even when we aren't. Later, you catch him repairing a split handle with twine and beeswax. He hums while he works. You almost don't recognize the tune. It's one of yours. Something you used to whistle while shelling peas in a house that burned down decades ago. You didn't know anyone remembered. He shrugs when you mention it. It stuck, he says. That evening, the two of you sit on the ridge above the fields, watching the sun stumble down the horizon like a tired drunk. Do you ever think about leaving? He asks. Every day, you say, and every day I don't. He thinks for a long while. Then, I could stay. You don't answer. The wind does, brushing past with the sharp tang of rosemary and something older, the kind of scent that clings to old temples and forgotten altars. "Would they miss you?" you ask. He doesn't respond right away. Finally, he says, "They would notice. Eventually. That's not the same." "No," he admits. "It isn't." Night comes quickly now. The sky bruises. The moon forgets to rise. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls. Not a threat, just a reminder. You descend the hill slowly, your knees aching like old debts. He stays a moment longer, staring at the horizon as if daring it to swallow him. When he joins you at the fire, he doesn't speak, just leans back against the woodpile, eyes closed. He looks tired, not weak, not mortal, just tired. You hand him a bowl of stew. He doesn't thank you. He doesn't need to. He eats like someone who knows the taste of hunger now, and maybe that's what frightens him. Not the pain, but the memory of never having felt it before. When the fire dies down, he doesn't get up. He stays by the embers, shoulders slumped, hair tangled. A god, undone by a week of work and weather. You watch him sleep, knees drawn up like a child, and wonder what happens to a myth when it decides it would rather be a man. The 9th morning arrives with no announcement, no birdsong, no shift in light, only the faint sound of water dripping into a cracked basin. A rhythm too gentle to wake you, but too steady to ignore. You rise not because you must, but because you always do, and that, in itself, is the rhythm that keeps the walls standing. Apollo is already outside, barefoot in the dew-slicked dirt, crouched by the fig tree with a basket half full of wind-fallen fruit. His robe is stained with earth and oil, his hair tied back with a fraying scrap of linen, and for a moment you don't see the god at all. Just a man quietly tending something that doesn't belong to him, but which he wants to leave better than he found it. You step beside him, take a pear from the basket, and bite without a word. It's overripe, sweet, but soft in the middle. You eat it anyway. He watches a beetle climb the bark, eyes narrowed like a priest reading omens in the grains of wheat. "They said I was the sun," he murmurs, "but I think I was just a fire someone fed for too long." You don't know what to say to that, so you say, "The sun burns itself to feed others. You did your job." He smiles faintly, the kind of smile people give when they aren't sure whether they're being comforted or scolded. That afternoon, he helps you mend the fence along the western ridge, the one the goats keep testing. He's stronger now, or maybe just clumsier with less care to hide it, and his hammering sounds more like conviction than grace. At one point, he hits his thumb and curses in a language you don't recognize. You offer him a smear of honey and herbs. He accepts it, muttering that even gods forget how small pain can be. Marmara wanders by and steals the cloth he wrapped it in. Neither of you stop her. Later, you find him in the shed, sharpening a rusted sickle he insists can still be useful. You watch from the door, arms crossed, as sparks jump from stone and metal in quiet defiance of the dimming light. "You know," he says without looking up, "when I first came here, I thought I was being punished." "You were," you reply, "but the punishment wasn't this place. It was that you thought you were above it." He stops, sets the blade down, looks at you, really looks, eyes the color of late wheat and long grief. And now, you say, you know how to hold a hoe without bleeding. You both laugh. It's a good laugh, ugly and true. That night, as the fire crackles low and the fig leaves rustle in their sleep, he begins to hum again. Not a song of Olympus, not a hymn or a prophecy, just a melody, small and winding and too old to belong to anyone. You recognize it, though. Your mother used to sing it when her hands ached from grinding grain. He sings it wrong. You don't correct him. The stars blink awake, indifferent as always, but something about them feels less cold now, like they're watching a candle flicker in a room they cannot enter. He doesn't float anymore. He doesn't glow. He just sleeps with his hands curled beneath his chin like a man too tired to dream. And you, for the first time in years, dream of nothing. The 9th day begins not with birdsong, but with the low creak of wood, your cart axle, groaning in the stable like an old priest trying to rise from prayer. You were sure it had broken weeks ago, but Apollo insists otherwise. You find him there in the pale light of dawn, lying on his back beneath the cart, bare feet sticking out, muttering calculations to himself. He's using your only good spoon as a measuring rod. You should be furious. You should say something. Instead, you lean on the doorframe and listen to the arithmetic of someone who once measured distances in constellations, now trying to align two crooked wheels with nothing but guesswork and stubbornness. You could just fix it, you say after a while. Snap your fingers. Make it new. He doesn't move, just sighs. But then it wouldn't be mine. You nod, unseen. That's how it starts, the claiming, not with thunder or oaths, but with the quiet tending of broken things. By midday, the sun comes heavy, thick as stew. You both strip to the waist, working in slow silence, turning the compost, trimming the grape leaves, sweating like creatures who bleed. The flies don't care that he's divine. They cling to him same as you. I thought gods didn't sweat, you tease. They don't, he says, swatting one from his temple. But I'm considering it. In the orchard, a pear tree has begun to droop. You teach him to bind the trunk with rope, gently, with kindness. It's just gravity, you say. But if you don't help it remember to stand, it'll forget. He strokes the bark like it's a wounded animal. You wonder, not for the first time, if he'll return to Olympus with twine still stuck to his fingers. That evening, the two of you sit by the stream, trousers rolled to the knee, feet in the cool water. He skips a stone poorly. You show him again, and again. He improves. By the 5th try, it hops twice. That counts, you say. I'm counting it. He grins childlike and wild, and for a moment he is not Apollo, not the god, not the light bringer, just someone named for brightness, sitting beside a stream, proud of a skipping stone. You tell stories, not myths but village tales, of the boy who fell in love with a goat, of the woman who stole a whole cart of cabbages and vanished into the hills. He laughs too loudly. You let him. You talk until the fireflies come, uninvited and welcome, blinking like lazy stars that got lost on the way to heaven. When you finally walk back, your shoulders ache, the good ache, the mortal ache, and his do too. You can tell. He no longer hides the limp, the stiffness in his step. And he doesn't heal himself either. Not anymore. You give him a salve of crushed mint and oil. He applies it without complaint. You know, he says, rubbing his shoulder, there's a word for this. What's that? Ordinary. You nod. It's the best kind of magic. He doesn't sleep in the cot tonight. He sleeps outside, near the fig tree, wrapped in a blanket that smells of goats and old lavender. You don't ask why. You know why. The stars are softer out here, and they no longer look down at him with expectation. Just quiet, slow surprise. The 10th day carries the smell of ripe pears left too long in the sun. Sweet and soft, but threaded with the first hints of rot. You feel it before you see it. That change, that invisible shift in the wind, the way the shadows stretch differently, like they're reaching for something that isn't there yet. Apollo is quieter this morning, not sad, not distant, just quiet in the way a song feels after the last note has fallen and you're left listening to the silence. He doesn't say it. You don't ask, but it's there, between the footprints in the dust, in the way he folds the blanket more carefully than usual, or how he sets the broom against the wall with a reverence usually reserved for altars. You work anyway, together, as if it's just another day, because that's how partings happen between people who learn to live side by side. You patch the roof. He harvests the onions, stacking them in crooked braids you know will fall apart next week. You let him. The chickens ignore him now, not because they're bored of him, but because they've accepted him, and that, for a chicken, is a holy thing. Marmara lets him scratch behind her ears. She doesn't even flinch. A blessing, you say, and he smiles. Or a test, he says. The pear tree gives you 4 good ones today. You split them, juice running sticky down your fingers, and eat without plates. He licks his wrist and laughs like a boy, and you don't tell him he has a seed stuck in his teeth. That afternoon he tunes the lyre, not to play it, just to feel the strings under his fingers one last time. You hear a note or two, wandering around the edge of a melody that never quite arrives. You don't ask him to finish. You just let the half-song hang in the air like steam from a winter cup. As the sun lowers, more red than gold now, less divine, you walk the edge of the field together. No words, just boots through dry grass, the sound of wind tugging gently at the hem of things. At the top of the ridge, you both stop. He looks east, not up, not toward Olympus, just east, toward the road. It's not time yet, he says. You nod. It never is. And he laughs soft and rueful. But it comes anyway. You sit side by side as the world dims. He picks up a clump of dirt, rolls it in his palm, then presses it into the earth like he's giving something back. I want to remember this, he says. You won't, you reply. Not clearly, but something will ache. He doesn't argue. You walk back slow, feet heavy, air cooler. At the door, he pauses, hand on the frame. You wait, but he doesn't move, just stands there. Say it, you whisper, or don't, but don't carry it. He turns, meets your eyes. And for a moment you see it, all of it, the centuries, the temples, the burnt offerings, the songs, the weight of worship, the ache of being endless. And then, quietly, he says, "Thank you." And you, a farmer, a mortal, someone who once planted onions and accidentally taught a god how to bruise, you say, "Sleep well." That night, the stars blink slower. The wind forgets to blow, and something deep beneath the soil exhales, like a god sinking gently into the memory of being loved without being praised. The 11th day never really arrives. It drifts in like mist that forgot it used to be rain. You wake slowly, not to a sound, but to its absence. No clatter of buckets, no muttering over porridge, no boots scraping at the threshold. Just stillness and the faint scent of olive oil and warm dust. You rise, step out into the yard, and the fig tree is untouched. The broom leans where he left it. The coals in the fire pit still sleep beneath a lid of ash. A god has gone, and yet everything is where it was. The gate is closed behind him, but not latched. The chickens cluck with indifference. Marmara chews something rubbery in the shade. You walk to the ridge, not quickly, not because you expect him to be there, he won't be, but because you want to see the path. And it's there. A single line of footprints in the dew-damp grass, heading east, fading where the hill dips out of sight. No thunder, no chariot, no golden farewell, just feet on dirt and silence. You sit there a while, knees drawn up, watching the sky slowly peel open. It's a modest sunrise, the kind you've seen 100 times, maybe more, but this one feels like it's trying to remember a tune, something plucked on an old lyre, once, when the pears were still firm and the gods had calluses on their hands. You find the spoon later, polished and bent, tucked beneath the cart axle. You leave it there, let it rust, let it root. That evening you make stew. One bowl. You eat outside, watching the stars appear, unsure whether they blink for you or just out of habit. You speak once, not loudly, just a murmur to no one, and say, "He forgot the eggs again." You think maybe that's what he'll remember. Not the lessons, not the chores, not even the orchard or the rain. Just that once he left without collecting the eggs. That somewhere, in a crooked coop behind a fig tree, a mortal woman muttered his name and meant it like a farewell. And maybe on Olympus, as they crown him in light and polish his robes, as they flood him with hymns he no longer sings, maybe he will wake in the middle of an endless day, touch his thumb and wonder why it aches. You go to bed early. The cot is empty. The blanket still smells like lavender and ash. You don't cry. There's nothing to mourn. He was never yours. But the soil he turned still holds the warmth of his hand. The vines he tied do not unravel. The tool he fixed still fits your palm. That is enough. That is more than most stories leave behind. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the stars rise. The god walks. The farm sleeps. And in the fig tree unseen, a single green shoot breaks through the branch. Late for the season, early for the telling. A final, ridiculous gift from someone who once mistook sunlight for permanence.